I am one of the luckiest people. I am sharing space with Kenn Payne. This is his YouTube channel. Do not make me say that. Sanctuary of the Hekate Polymorphous. Is that close?
That's correct.
Okay. Woo! Go me. Go me. I'm Tarot Stash. Thank you for being here. Kenn, how have you been since the last time we saw each other?
Yeah, I've been plodding along. That's kind of my general vibe. And as I say, we've discussed before we came on. I've kind of had this sort of sense of ennui on a spiritual base.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I know that I'm still on, the right path and stuff. I'm not, yes. I'm not gonna do a Doreen Virtue. Don't worry. I'm not gonna have a meltdown and convert and, whatnot. But yeah, I think when the discussions that we had just prior have kind of shed a bit of light on a few things that I will then, go off and explore and shake it off. But yeah, apart from that, I've been good. Just pottering about with my cats and trying to get this book written. And
you heard him. He's working.
Yes, I am doing it. I'm doing it. I was working on it this last week and the weekend. My problem is once I get all the books off the shelf and start like note taking and things, I end up down rabbit holes, and then I'm like, actually, you were supposed to be doing a card description, and you've ended up off on a tangent. But
yes, but aren't those side quests sometimes where you find the most treasure, the unexpected treasure?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's definitely, it's all learning in one form or another, and then hopefully once I've teased the most relevant bits out, I can put them in the expanded text, and hopefully then eventually get it out to you guys.
Thank you. And okay, and Beth Aspasia Rising is here and said he had me at ennui, And yes, Beth, I did show him the ennui video that I have, and Beth called it a divine detour.
Yeah, most definitely.
So Beth is here, Aspasia Rising, who says hi, and baby is coming tomorrow, June 25th. So this is
there seems to be a thing with people on your channel having babies.
I have nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. So, but there you go. And by the way, just so that everybody knows, this is for entertainment purposes only. Do not make decisions based upon what we say. Seek professional assistance, really. And this is a laugh and learn about the goddess Hekate. And this is part 2. The link to part 1 is in the description. So if you've missed that, please do go take a look at that. I thought we had a really good discussion, and I am, and again, I'm going to remind everybody: purchase responsibly, know your limits. We're here to share, not to sell. Kenn is the author of Oracle of the Hekatean Path, and it's illustrated by Chris Butler. And so there's good links below in the description. It is a Lo Scarabeo deck, and it is this is where I keep teasing Kenn. I'm like going, we want more, we want more, I would like more. I would like more, I should say. So, and it's mostly my 2 granddaughters and all of the drama, Kenn. So,
drama.
What's drama? Well, okay. So, if people have questions about the goddess Hekate or Hecate, please let us know. Oh, here you go. We have one. But you may already address this. But Kenn, do you work with other deity?
So yes and no. Hecate has been the sort of principle and sort of focus in my practice, obviously for the last sort of 15 years or so, but not to the sort of exclusion of every every other deity or spirit out there. I've had dealings with. I think we did sort of touch on it a bit in the first part. I've had interactions with Dionysus, Aphrodite, Pan, Odin, Keridwen.
Mhm.
So Isis as well. She kind of gets on quite well with Hecate, I find. Um, but it's always been a case of whatever the tangent or whatever the reason for me to go to that deity to learn something or to find something out it always brings me back to Hecate. So what she usually ends up in pole position.
Well, and so here's an interesting question. Are you meeting those deities because of Hecate, or are those deities sort of showing up and they're a part of the divine detour?
Sometimes they've been divine detours. Other times it has been in relation to something with Hecate. Usually more to do with the the ones within the Greco-Roman pantheon have been something to do with my relationship with Hecate. Whereas with the likes of Odin and Ceridwen, it was more a case of me trying to ignore them because I was like, no, I've got Hecate, and I need to pay attention to her. And then obviously not listening to the signs. They get louder and louder and louder, and then I go to Hecate, going, "Oh my god, what am I going to do? Odin won't leave me alone. He's in my dreams. He keeps showing me things." And then she was just like, "So just listen, just go and see what he wants." And all he wanted to do was make the rooms clear, because up until that point they had been as clear as mud and gave me a headache. He
Mhm.
showed me that I suddenly understood how to use them and what they meant and how they worked. And then he kind of just stepped back and went, "Okay, yeah, you can go now." And then, Hecate was like, "See, it wasn't that bad, was it?"
Well, I think having a like a patroness like Hecate, it's pretty powerful, and I might suggest actually listening to her.
Oh, yes. I mean, I must be a glutton for punishment for the amount of times I try and think that I can divert something or ignore something. You would have thought I would have learned by now, but I guess that's part of being human.
Yes, I agree. Beth also said, drama is the opposite of ennui. LOL.
Hmm. Yeah. Energetic polarity on that one.
Yes. Beth also had another question. Do you use multiple altars or change one up or ... question mark?
So I have had multiple ones in the past. My current living space is not very big. I don't have the space to have the big multiple altars that I've had in previous houses and things.
Mhm.
I tend to always at least have Hecate with a space. And then I think it was about a year or so ago, I found a really good piece of furniture that literally fit into a space that I had, like, perfectly.
I love
And
that.
that became more of a sort of working space for the more practical side of magic and things like that. And of course Hecate is on there as well.
Yes.
um but obviously in a household that's not very big with 4 cats, having any amount of altars it's not easy work.
Yes. I would say that that's almost fair game for
Hmm.
the
the
cats.
thing the thing is, though, is my first 2 cats, they never bothered. They just had no interest whatsoever. These current 4, always jumping up on it. I mean, one of them chewed one of the horns off my Dionysus statue. I'd customized him with some little horns, and he just chewed it off. You know, I wake up in the morning and there's like incense sticks knocked all over the floor. You know, anything that I leave on the top is just pinged off. So I had to sort of put everything into drawers and out the way. My statue has taken a nosedive once or twice.
Oh no!
Thankfully, you know, bounced and not broke, which is
good.
Surprising considering this is a concrete floor under this little thin carpet. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know, and I know people that do just have one central altar, and you know, people have multiple ones. At certain times when I've had a lack of space, I have shared space. You know, Hecate has been alongside another deity or multiple deities. You know, just because, you know, in an ideal world, yeah, they'd all have separate spaces, but we don't all live in massive mansionettes.
Yeah. And Beth says, I guess I'm wondering if you allow sharing altars. For instance, right now I have some spell work right next to some other spell work, right next to Ritchie, etc.
So, I mean, I don't personally see that there's a problem. The only time I would ever sort of say there's a problem with sort of altars side by side, or, you know, the sharing of space and things, is if mythologically speaking, they don't get on, you know. So don't necessarily go and stick a statue of Demeter next to Hades, you know, not necessarily the best.
Well, it depends upon the outcome you are desiring.
Well, yeah, there is argument for that, but generally speaking, go with your intuition, but also ask the deities concerned. You know, they will tell you if they want to share space with each other. You know, one of the things what I had when I was exploring my sort of druid studies, and Ceridwen was coming through, and I said to Hecate, I was like, what do I do? It's like she's making herself known, but I don't want to sort of offend you or, you know, detract from what I'm doing with you. And she was just like, yeah, just go and do. She literally referred to her as her sister, and she just went, go and do it. And she did. I did it. Ceridwen was there through the bardic grade of my studies, and then she departed, and you know, the equilibrium came back.
Well, yes. Okay, so I have a couple of things that that have come up for me on that, because one of them things that we talked about last time, Ken, is we talked about how does one celebrate, or how can one celebrate Hecate, and I think it also is, it's an idea of, well, I'll stop there because I'll press pause. I'm going to put a pin in the other thought. So how does one celebrate, or can one celebrate Hecate?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, anybody can celebrate any deity, you know, dependent on how you want to go about doing it. You know, if you do look into the history and the mythology and the religion of ancient cultures, you can find examples of, you know, ways that the deities were venerated. Whereas where Hecate is concerned, you know, we know of things like the Hecate suppers, and things like the procession of the key at Lagina, between Lagina and Stratonicia. There was like the I think it was the daughter of the priest or the mayor of the city or something, basically would get a key and process from one point to the other along a sacred roadway. They've recently been doing excavations, and they're actually excavating this sacred roadway between the two sites. There's, you know, she was also had, you know, a role in the Eleusinian mysteries, you know, and although they are, you know, an initiatory tradition, and we don't know the full details because, you know, most true initiates took the secret to their graves, literally,
Of course,
you know.
yes.
So we only have sort of a little bit of guesswork and conjecture, and possibly people that may or may not have blabbed, you know, along the way. But, you know, that's not to say that anything that's not old is not necessarily relevant. You know, there's through the confusion and misinterpretation of things like the old lunar calendar in ancient Greece. We then had this thing in the modern sense where the 30th of every month was classed as Hecate's day, whereas actually it was because it doesn't work in a solar calendar, because it would in a lunar one that would be the end of the lunar month, so therefore it would be the dark moon. But there are some people that adhere to it in this modern context as well. Same with things like the 16th of November and the 30th of November being Hecate's night and Hecate's night of the crossroads. Again, there's a bit of confusion between ancient sort of sources and modern interpretations, but it is still celebrated, by people. The rite of her sacred fire is a thoroughly modern celebration of Hecate and her mysteries. That's been going for what, 13 years? No, 2010, 20, well, since 2010. So what's that? 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah, so we just had that in the full moon in May. That's every full moon in May. So yeah, there's so many ways. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be pomp and ceremony and sacrifice of 100 oxen and and all that kind of stuff. It can be a very quiet and reserved and personal thing, as long as it's coming from a place of true devotion. Then there's no wrong way of doing it.
You said, you ended that with what I think is extremely important is if whatever you do to honor and celebrate and give devotion to, if it's authentic, it's going to be perfect. You can light a little birthday candle with for Hecate, and watch it burn down. I mean, and whatever is authentic and meaningful for you and connects you to the deity, I think that's beautiful. Beautiful. Ratu is here. Hello. Good to see you. And Beth said, if I created an altar for Hecate, I think I'd get an iron key first.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it's a good place to start as any. We already know that keys are associated with her. With her quite strongly. I have several keys that I use both. I have small ones and big ones, and that I use sometimes as a sort of symbolic decorative item, other times in more sort of a ritual sort of sense. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. The iron is a good sort of grounding force.
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely think that would be a perfect place to start.
Yeah. And Bratu said, intention holds more power than ceremony.
Yeah,
I think so. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, there are the sort of not the reconstructionist sort of people as such, but there are certain arguments between orthopraxy and orthodoxy. Right practice over right belief, and there are arguments for and against it. But at the end of the day, if you are just paying lip service to things and going through motions because that's the way it's always been done, you're missing the point of embodying a living, breathing tradition.
Yes. You are perpetuating it not being a living and breathing tradition. And I also think with this is when you can match intention and the power of ceremony, you augment it.
Yeah.
Because I am a firm, and yes, some truly need the ceremony.
Yeah.
I think there's ceremony and ritual.
There is a comfort in repetition, in familiarity. There are, and even in amongst pagans and witches, we have things that we do. We might have certain prayers or certain ritual gestures that we do on a daily basis. It's all part of the sort of intention and ceremony, and depending on how we're feeling at any given time. We might not necessarily have the compass mentis to put the intention behind it, but at least we know if we are doing it, we're doing it, and then next time we can try and pay a bit more attention. And so I think, you know, it's neither one nor the other wholly. That's how some people do actually look at it. They think, oh, well, you have to be one or the other, and it's like, actually, no, you've kind of got to get in that middle ground, and unfortunately life gets in the way, and so you know.
I also think that we do fluctuate. We're humans, and our experience is different. So some truly need the ceremony. I am a person who I like ceremony, because I studied Tai Chi for a year many years ago, and there was a particular music that was used, and you know, I still to this day I hear that music and I am immediately in that place. I know how to sit. I know what to do with my body before it. It's very interesting. And Beth said the way I see it is ceremony helps manifest intention.
Yep.
And the power can build in that and can be tapped for later. Yeah. Yes, ceremony without intention is meaningless show.
Yeah, it's pantomime. You know,
yes,
you can tell that, you know, we've probably all experienced things in either, you know, group rituals or public rituals or event, you know, where there's a ritual that's happened. Some have been absolutely mind blowing, others have been a damp squib. It, you know, and that is the difference between, well, I suppose the intention behind it, but also the intention of the enactors doing it. You know, are they trying to do a ceremony, or are they trying to do, you know, a show? You know, for people.
Yeah, and my Wi-Fi is going a little weird, so if I pop out, sorry. I also think what you're saying, Ken, is that we need to trust our intuition and our feelings, because if I'm experiencing something and I'm sort of going, what's up here? I need to pay attention to what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing, because that's just for me. It's not for other people. And so my experience is different than yours. And I am a firm believer that both of those experiences are equally important. So, and Mark has just joined us. Hello, Mark. And Mark is on your channel. So, and so thank you for being here, Mark. So here's the other question that I had is what is on your altar for Hecate?
So I'm going to look, because it is literally over here.
Course,
so
of course.
If I'm looking, it's not that I'm not paying attention. So on her main one, I've got it quite simple at the minute. I have it's like a, I don't really know what to describe it as. It's a very sort of antique miniature little drawer compartment thing that I found on, I don't even know what it was, some selling app website thing years ago. And that became a sort of a raised platform in which to put my altar statue on. And then again, a few years ago on Facebook Marketplace, somebody was selling an old jewelry shop window display that was shaped like a Grecian temple front, you know, the portico and the two columns and then some steps. So I bought that, and then I painted it up and stuff, and it fits on top of it flat against the wall. And then my image can sit within the columns, and so there's that Grecian sort of style to it. And I bought again on eBay or, you know, charity shops or wherever. They're big wrought iron sort of scroll work torch holder things, but for candles. They were horribly rusty. I managed to find some paint that you could literally paint over rust, and it made no difference, and it kind of made it come out in like a very dappled textured gold. So I have them flanking the central image, so as a representation of the torches. And then usually in the sort of on the groundwork of it is where I will have things like libation dish, incense burner, possibly a central candle, or a disc with the Hecate wheel symbol on. And occasionally I will, I'll mix it up. There'll be keys on there. There might be my prayer beads from Jason Miller's Sorcery of Hecate course, other symbols, or sometimes crystals. I have 2 golden healer quartz that are shaped like flames, and I have them sort of close by to her image. So yeah, sometimes it's a bit more cluttered than others, but I tend to try and keep that particular one quite simple. That's more just for the regular devotion, whereas my main working space, although she is on there are lots of other things on there as well.
Yeah. Oh no, I completely understand. I actually have, I would say I have 3 altars that contain Hecate. My main Hecate altar has my dark moon water that I put out during dark moons. I have black stones. I have a black skull. I have 2 candlesticks that a friend of my father made that are black, that are from the spiral wood, that when I saw them, I'm like going, oh, these are for my altar. And I went, okay, I'll get them. And I also have, and it's interesting is because for me, I actually have sound is important. And I actually have little candlestick holders that are actually bells.
Okay.
So you can put a candlestick in there, and oftentimes I will make beeswax candles that will fit in there, but you can lift them up, and I use them to work on quarter calling if I need to. And then in my main working altar, I have Hecate, and I have Sekhmet statuary on it, because I work with both of them. They are extremely important to me, and they actually like to be as close as they are, because in my mind, they're equally powerful. And, with the 2 of them, okay, I'm pretty set.
You're not gonna mess with you, are you?
No. Yes. Yes. And then also, and this goes back to something that Beth said, I actually have, I have 3 keys, 3 iron keys that are in my car to keep me safe whilst I'm driving. So I think 3 keys would be great, Beth. If you could find 3 keys.
I mean, and I will say as well that if anybody wants to see examples of mine, you can see I've got lots of different examples, because I change it up a lot as well over time. On my Instagram, I tend to post pictures of pre or post, makeovers, shall we say, altar makeovers.
Yeah.
But I will also say that nobody should feel the need to hold themselves in comparison to somebody else's altars or sacred spaces. Yes, there are those really nice showy ones, and I like a good space as much as anybody else, but it's not always necessary or practical. Just because you haven't got a statue or a big statue, a picture will work, or some other form of representation. I mean, in antiquity, sometimes a rock that looked a particular way, or a meteorite that fell from the sky, would be the focal image in a temple, because they associated it with a divinity. And so it's always good to look at other people's for inspiration and ideas, but never feel as though you're somehow lacking or less than just because you're not as big and bright and shiny as they are.
Yes. That's a really good point. I think this is for me, it's about, and oftentimes with deity, and in particular Hecate, I knew that my relationship was different than what everybody else's was, and I leaned into that. So,
And
and
everybody's different. That's the thing. You know, yours is different from mine. Mine is different from, I don't
yep,
know, somebody else's. You know, you will not find somebody who has a exact match of experience and relationship to any spiritual being as yours. And that's
right.
okay.
And that's encouraged, actually. I think that's really, really powerful. Robert Fierro Taro is here. Hello, good to see you. And Maze M said, what kind of prayer beads you like to use with Hecate? Mala beads or the type with several decades or something else? And hello all.
So I originally my use of prayer beads or mala beads in relation to Hecate was solely from when I did Jason Miller's sorcery for Hecate course, where as one of the prerequisites for doing that is every day you recite Eo Heka Eo Ho 100 times as part of the thing on the mala, and eventually you construct a mala from ideally from snake bones and you know, fire agates and things like that. And so I've used a normal very small beaded labradorite mala for convenience. And I do have my snake bone Jason Miller mala for that I tend to use specifically if I'm, you know, working within his arcana. But yeah, I mean, anywhere people, you know, there are people that make more rosary style sort of prayer beads and things like that, and they're fine. You know, it's whatever. Again, it's whatever works. There's no right or wrong way. You know, there's no real historical context for the use of them in relation to Hecate. But that doesn't mean that there's not a modern, you know, modern practice of doing it. You know, and some people, you know, they like to do it with you know, mantras or affirmations or prayers or, you know, whatever it is, or even just something to keep you focused while you're, you know, being mindful of Hecate in that given moment. So yeah, I mean, I would say anything that works for you, really.
I wonder, Maze, I'm curious about what you're thinking of using. I mean, what is it? So I think that could be a really powerful thing. And Beth said, thank you, Gerald. On the Artemis of finding objects, they will be found for the 3 keys. And I actually prefer symbolic representation like a key or a crystal or animal association.
And I mean, you know, the animal association as well. You know, every time I think of obviously animals in relation to Hecate, obviously you've got the animals that are sacred to her, but it always brings back that image that was the inspiration for the Potnier Throne card in my oracle from the Jason and the Argonauts, the original film, where the in the temple of Hecate when Medea's doing that dance, the statue is animal headed, and it, you
Do you
know,
remember the number?
It's in the teens, 14, or is it 8?
Let me look. I thought I actually had these in order, but I had been playing with them. This one?
That's the one, yeah. And so, you know, I took inspiration from that animal figured or animal headed Hecate, which does have historical precedence. You know, she's been seen with many different animals heads, you know, lions, wolves, goats, horses, bulls, snakes. You know, there's a lot of association with animal forms of Hecate. So yeah, I mean, you know, there is definitely something to be said as well about this symbolic representation of the goddess. I think sometimes when we have a statue or an image, we can become focused on that as being the goddess. Whereas if there's an absence of that and an abstractness to what we are sort of connecting with, then we're at, you know, it's more getting a feel for the essence of Hecate.
Yeah. Hi, Mary Hernandez Walker. And Beth loves this card so much.
Oh, thank you. It is one of mine and Chris's favorites. It was one of those ones where I pushed Chris for his, you know, to exceed his talent. And then he sat back and he was just like, I think that's one of the best things I've ever done. Like at that particular moment in time. Yeah, it was definitely a really cool card to create.
Yeah. And Beth says, I usually think dog and snake.
Yeah.
And Robert is changing devices. So, you know, here, is he left to his own devices? You know, he probably would. Sorry, just gave a Pet Shop Boys reference. But yeah. So I think one of the things that I wrote this down from our last conversation, which is stuck with me, is that the Hecate liminal rights. You were talking about that she seems to, you know, she's in the liminal space. Is that something you can talk a little bit more about? I'm curious about that.
It's something I'm still kind of trying to get my head around, because it is quite an abstract concept to sum up in a very easily digestible way. But if you really think that every moment is a liminal space, we kind of always exist in a liminal space. You know,
Yes.
the minute you fixate on the present, it becomes the past, or, you know, and the future becomes the present. So we might always be trying to project back or forward, but we actually exist in this present moment that doesn't technically exist. And so we have this constant sense of liminality. And then when you think, or when you look into the concept of liminality, you know, you're not just seeing Hecate at crossroads. It's about every occurrence of liminality, life to death, you know, entrance way to, you know, to the outside, you know, underworld to heaven, and you know, the main world, but also things like, you know, one stage of life to the other. You know, everything is a liminal point. And when we look at Hecate in this sort of axis mundi, world soul sort of concept, you know, she's at the center. She's the fulcrum at the center of the universe, which is expanding outward all the time. But she's also at the very, you know, edge of the known expanded universe, and is also present at every other point in between. And so it's one I'm still trying to sort of succinctly get my head around. But she's everywhere in a nutshell.
Well, I will have to say, I thought you explained that very well. I followed everything that you were saying.
No, I'm glad somebody
did. Well, I followed you along, and you can watch the playback too. But and you know, it's interesting. And Ken and I were having a conversation backstage, and you're talking about liminality. Isn't that a card of liminality?
Yeah. And actually, what you said about it, because for those that obviously we're not privy to the backstage thing, the Two of Swords is my nemesis card. It always comes up in readings when I don't really know what to do. And Gerald happened to point out the sort of symbolic crossroads with the two swords, and then the central figure being the center of these crossroads. And so, yeah, it is a liminal point personified. Yeah, but everything is. This is
yes.
When you start to think about it, you're just like, well, even if you get up and walk from one bit to another, you know, from one room to another, you pass through a liminal point. Yes. You know, the choice to make a decision from one to the other involves a liminal space in between. You know, yes. But and that's the thing. She exists in those liminal points, but she also exists at either side as well, because she looks in all directions. And so yeah, it's almost like she's looking down one direction to another face of herself, which is then looking off in another direction. And I suppose if you build on that, you end up with this interconnectivity of
Yes.
of everything, this web of life, the web of weird, or whatever you want to, refer to it as.
So then she has something to do with spiders too.
Well, not sort of directly. There is one reference in, I forget which which old Greek wrote it, but there is a reference in the myth of Athena and Arachne where it is said that obviously Athena sprinkles Arachne with herbs of Hecate to transform her into the spider. But obviously in the more sort of modern sense where Hecate is seen more as a dark goddess, things like spiders and bats and such get associated with her. And I personally find that when I'm, like you say, going back to the ennui thing, when I'm experiencing that ennui and that sort of sense of perpetual crossroad paralysis, that spiders appear to me as a sort of sign to be creative, whether that's for me to write or to make something or paint or draw or at least try to draw. So yeah, I mean, I suppose, even going back to the Potnia Theron, the Lady Wild Beast, technically all animals could come under that. So spiders could come under that just as much as any other. But yeah.
Yeah. Brad 2 says, rules all that passes between. I actually sort of like that. That works. Kiba Lyons is here, and Jane the Seeker is here. Hello. And Maze M said, I have chanted with mala beads earlier for Kali Ma. Recently, I received Catholic-style rosary, and I'd like to remove the crucifix and have Goddess or Hekate symbol and use them somehow.
Yeah, I mean, there are, again, there are people that I know that have done that. I mean, I would say as long as it was never, formally blessed or anything as a Catholic thing, make sure it's de-blessed or thing before you technically deconstruct it to put something else onto it. That's the only ever times I would ever be cautious about about utilizing other things. Similarly with anything that is particularly entrenched in a cultural practice, so I can never remember what they're called, but like the seed bead malas that are used in like Buddhism and stuff like that. Is it Rudish chakra or something? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But yeah, anything that it's specifically linked to another practice, I would probably, you can make one in the style of from other materials and things, that's fine, but don't necessarily go and sort of buy one from a seller of those type of things to use for your own.
It's like you want to decommission it and cleanse it before you set it for the new purpose. It's it's like when you move house. Before you move into a house, you want to clean it before you show up. So in other words, sage that.
Or
I would do that, but
sage, Palo Santo, whatever your preferred method is.
And I would say, Maze M, and again, for entertainment purposes only, if it feels right to do, I would consider it, and I would follow that line of thinking, because you may discover something that is extremely meaningful for you. And it doesn't sound like you want to do anything disrespectful with it. And I mean, and by the way, my experience with Hecate is if I'm disrespectful, I will be taught that I was disrespectful very quickly. So that's been my experience. Your mileage may vary. So Beth said, I kind of see her. I kind of see her seen in 3 dimensions, past, present, and future, like moon phases, waning, full, waxing, like life phases, maiden, mother, crone.
Yeah, I mean that she's been associated at one point or other with all those varying things. We know her as this threefold, triple sort of formed goddess predominantly, but obviously originally she was single formed, and then later there was 4 forms. There was 4 heads, four bodies, 4 sets of arms, and things like that. So she's definitely got this. It is like an omnipresence,
Yes.
but that's not to say necessarily that she's there at everybody's beck and call. She's got her own stuff to do. She's not waiting on you to
Yeah.
hit her up for whatever you you want. And
Right.
that I think that's one of the things that I can't remember if we touched on it last time or not, but this notion of when she is distant, when she is afar, or we feel as though she's not listening, or she was like that. There seems to be a notion in modern pagan movements and modern spiritual movements about this, that faith is a dirty word because of all of the the Christianization between things like but actually that's what you still we still need that. We still need to have faith that the powers that we believe in, the gods and the spirits, etc., even if they're not readily apparent to us, or they're not sort of necessarily answering our petitions or our spells and stuff, we don't just you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, well, that's it, they don't exist, so I'm just not going to bother. You have to have that faith. And I see it time and time again in a lot of the groups and the forums where people that will come forward and say, I really feel as though she's distanced herself from me or whatever. And it's like, yeah, she might have done, but you've got to figure out why. And I always find that in my personal experience is that she's sort of behind, sort of shining ahead, but occasionally, like currently, she disappears. And 9 times out of 10, it's because she's further down, waiting. She's waiting for me to catch up, but she's leaving me to make the discoveries and the lessons and learn things to get me along the way. And then when I catch up, she'll be like, see, you did it, right, let's go on to the next kind of thing.
And thank you, Beth, for putting this in there. Faith is belief in something we can't see. It's not one denomination. And I think that's so true. That's so true. And by the way, let's see, Viviani is here. Hello, Viviani. And Sage Rainbow Hall. Any thought on the connection between Hecate and Diana? And hi, Lottie B.
So obviously before the Roman period, Hecate and Artemis, they became quite closely linked, sometimes conflated, sometimes the identification of one goddess became synonymous with the other. And in a similar way, when the Romans kind of took over, it kind of happened again. And so you get these references to Diana as Diana Trivia, of the 3 ways. Hecate is sometimes referred to as Diana of the underworld. And obviously the most famous festival, the Nemeralia of Diana at Lake Nemi, is kind of where we get the origins for some sort of, again, misinterpreted modern festivals, where it becomes this festival of torches, which it tends to get associated with Hecate now. But there was this conflation between Hecate and Diana at this point, where it was a nocturnal ritual where with a torchlit procession to Lake Nemi, which would reflect the moon, and it was all there was it was like a sacred grove, and it was seen as being like Diana's mirror, as a a massive scrying sort of surface type thing. So yeah, there is historical conflation. Again, definitely look up the works of Sarita Dieste. She goes into that quite a bit in both of her Hecate specific books, but she also did write a volume on Artemis many years ago, and obviously she still talks about Diana, and again the conflation with Hecate and that. So yeah, you know, again, when people ask about connections or conflations with different goddesses, again, it always depends on what your flavor of polytheism is. You know, whether you believe all goddesses are one goddess, or whether you believe they're all separate, or whether you believe that some are distinctly separate and others are just interpretations from different cultures with different names. So, you know, without getting entrenched in those muddy waters, you know, I view them as separate, but I can see how, you know, in the past and even today, that some people would see similarities between the two, and therefore not necessarily say, oh well, they must just be the same goddess, but to say, well, if I need this, I can call on either one. And you know, that's when you get those conflated titles. So you get people that will say Hecate Diana, you know, with a little hyphen between the names, or Diana Hecate, or Diana Trivia, or you know, things like that. So, and again, you know, you think about Diana and Hecate, they're both light bringers, you know, associated with the moon and the torches. In the Italian Iradian sort of current, you know, Lucifer, the light bringer, is in that, and so you can see the connections.
Yeah.
But they, you know, they do have historical precedent.
Of course. And Merita is here. Hello, and thank you for putting in Kenn's link. And by the way, everybody, all of Kenn's contact information and his social media stuff is linked in the description below, as is our first conversation about Hecate. And I've also linked you and Chris talking about this deck, as well as our conversation about this, because, you know, I squeed about that. And so, of course, I'm going to share that with people because I'm very pleased with it. So, but yeah, I do think it's interesting. Something that I appreciate in talking with you, Kenn, I'm going to heap praise in your general direction. So get ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. One of the things that I appreciate about you and your research and your writing is you put things in context, because one needs to understand. In order to understand something, you have to understand what came before it and what comes after it. Because this is, we're talking about the liminal space, which is hard to describe, but what was here before and what was here afterwards, that's a very important part for me. That gets me to go down so many rabbit holes. And so I think about, you know, if you were to, I also see the world in transparencies. I like to take different cultural and different experiences. And do you remember in the encyclopedias back when you were a kid? I think they still had them when you were young, where, you know, you'd get to the human body and you could pull off the transparencies.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And so there were layers. I believe a lot of deity is that there's a lot of similarities amongst pantheons. And I am a person who I will absolutely mix my pantheons. I do it all the time. It's like having a dinner party. They're here. They love it. So, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, you know, when you're saying about the similarities between deities within pantheons and stuff, I've always sort of thought about that in terms of that, you know, back then when life was harder, but also a lot simpler, you know, every culture, every part of the world, everywhere people existed, they would have had by and large the same needs, the same fears, the same desires, etc. You know, safety, you know, abundance as far as like agriculture or, you know, food, you know, fertility, and you know, they would all be fairly similar, even if the context was slightly different. And so it makes sense that within each of those cultural contexts that they would make sense of, you know, natural phenomenon or supernatural phenomenon to represent the same things, but just call them different names. And it's interesting sometimes how even different, you know, cultures that are either apart in distance and or time, where the similarities between deities are actually really not just as far as what their you know, what their attributes and that are, but also on the how they've been depicted or how they've been viewed. There can be similarities there, and you think that there's got to have been some underlying, you know, I don't know, collective unconscious understanding of these forces. And so I always look at it from that kind of point.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for supporting what I was saying and building on it, because you're highly educated and that works extremely well. So I did pose a question to Robert Fierro Tarot. By the way, if you haven't followed his channel, please do, because he's doing some great conversations.
And I was on there as well.
Yes. And Robert said, I keep wanting to call him Bobby. So
I keep calling him Bobby.
Okay. So on my altar, I have my statue, my candles, and different stones for my workings. I associate blue gold stone with her more than any other stone. So, and because I asked Bobby, what is on your altar? So I'm curious, is if anybody who is watching has an altar or does something, works with Hecate, or gives devotion to, I would love to hear what you're doing with your devotion. And Beth brought up, look at how many crossovers the Morrigan has.
Yeah, that is one hell of a rabbit hole to go down.
Yes. And so if anybody has questions that they would like to ask Kenn or me, I mean, I'm going to bow to the expert, but because I think, Kenn, you and I talked about my. Let me back up a bit. Now I'm getting a lot of information. And Merita says, love blue goldstone. It's like the clear midnight sky. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
and I like.
I've often like viewed it as, you know, as sort of stone of the night sky. You know, I've utilized it in the past with Hecate. I know some people that view it, you know, in relation to Nyx or Asteria, you know, because of that starry sort of quality that it has. It is a very nice, pretty, shiny stone, and it's cheap.
Well, and this is why I like doing these laugh and learns. You have different stones for your workings. I had not actually considered having a stone for particular working. Now you got me thinking.
I mean, I utilize, for like, if it's the full moon or the dark moon, because again, you know, being in England where the weather changes on a pinhead from 1 hour to the next, you know, the likelihood of having a clear sky on any celestial event is next to impossible. So what I have a selenite charging plate sat around one. So on the full moon, that represents my moon. So anything I can put on there to be charged will help with that. And I have an obsidian scrying mirror, but it's the same size and the same shape. And I utilize that for the dark moon and for channeling the dark moon energies down into whatever is on it. I've utilized stones in the colors of black, white, and red for divinatory purposes, for grid purposes. I mean, I suppose the sky's the limit. You know, what your brain can kind of think to do, and it's good that, you know, you can find these inspirations from other people and try it and see, and you know, there's so many avenues to explore.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, especially when I would encourage people, if you want to work with Hecate or Hekate, approach her respectfully. Approach her, you know, don't be barreling in and, you know, banging down the door with a sledgehammer or anything like that. I mean, you can, good luck. But if you knock on the door and you wait for a response, and if you don't get a response the first time, knock on the door again and check yourself. I think that's really important because I think she is extremely powerful. She will change your life.
Sorry, I was getting numb leg.
Numb leg. Uh-oh. And okay, so Robert said, also Bobby said, and of course I have my Kenn Payne deck, the Oracle of the Hekatean Path. So, so I had to put that up there because, duh. Well, it's got to feel good that people are using your deck.
Yeah, I mean, even when I go and have a little look on Instagram and things, that looking for the hashtag just to see if it pops up. Sometimes, even if I'm not looking for it, and somebody's taking a picture of their altar in general, and I can see it, and I'm just like, there is a little bit of you that sort of goes, because you're really excited.
Yes.
Because obviously it's out there and people are connecting with it, and it's just, that's amazing, which I still don't fully grasp yet, but
well, that's okay. I mean, just wait until your book comes out. Your mind's gonna be blown. Beth says, I use crystals in my workings, crystals and candles. I stopped using incense. That's just me. I am a big fan of I use frankincense because that is something for me growing up. The ceremony of mass, there was always frankincense, and it elevates me somewhere else. Beth says, I associate labradorite and onyx with Hecate. And
I use labradorite a lot. It's one of my favorite stones, and I do associate it with Hecate more often than not because it is literally seen as a stone that that's useful for magic, but it's also a very protective stone as well. And so I think it quite happily goes alongside her, and I think there is a liminal quality to it with the way that it catches light to create that that sort of luminescence, because it's just a rock, and then you look at it from a certain angle in a certain light, and all of a sudden there's these wild, crazy colors.
Yes. And I love this too. Bratu said, talking about knocking on the door. The mother may be busy. Knock and ask.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't do anything to a deity or with a deity that you wouldn't do in real life. You wouldn't just barge into someone's home and expect them to, do what you wanted.
Well, I wouldn't. Some people might. Some people might. And
you won't get a very good. You won't get very good reception, though. That's the point.
True. That is true. And Berto said and Black Moonstone.
Yeah, I love Black Moonstone as well. I utilized that, and actually, I found that although it's technically not a moonstone, the sort of rainbow moonstone, the white one that has the blue flash, and then obviously I then found Black Moonstone, and then recently. Green Moonstone I found is very good for her sort of more earthly nature based things, and occasionally I've got like it's like a big tumble of Green Moonstone, and on one side it actually has a blue flash on it, and it's really, really nice.
I love that. Oh, and Bobby has said I bought a second deck so I can use it in my professional readings. So and so, and Beth says, I have a lot of Black Moonstone on my altar. It's one of my favorite stones. I'm a person, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a person of a lot of balance. I'm always looking for, we've got to have, we have to have a balance. So I'm also looking for black, gray, and white moonstone, so could Moldavite work with Hecate?
I will say one thing with Moldavite. I don't like it, and it doesn't like me. That's me just personally. It literally is the nearest thing I can sort of ever equate it to is I always say it's my kryptonite, and that's not just because it looks like kryptonite, but if I am in the vicinity of it, it makes me sick. It literally feels
Interesting.
as though somebody has got their hand up inside of my guts and is doing that with it. To the
Wow.
point where I actually can tell if it's in the vicinity, even if it's not visible. And also because obviously it's one of those ones that there's a lot of fake rubbish out there.
Yes.
I've had it where when people have found out that I don't like it, they would be like, well, is this real? And then they give it to me and I hand it them back and I can say yes or no because of how it makes me feel. But yeah, personally, I don't like it. But as far as utilizing it with Hecate, yeah, it is a stone that is caused obviously from meteoric impact in a certain part of the world. So you know, though that sort of celestial, energetic, creationary thing, all types of, you know, tektite and sort of volcanic type glass as on obsidians, meteorites, all of those type of things, well, you know, well associated with Hecate.
It clears pathways. So
it would clear something else if I held on to it for too long. I think I would probably throw up.
Well, we don't want that to happen.
No.
And Merita said Labradorite is also a pathfinder like Hecate, leading the way with her torch. That's a beautiful description. And Beth likes Peach Moonstone for healing and calming. So, but yeah, I think you know, something that I wrote down is this. You were talking about how sometimes people feel disconnected with the deity. There, you know, oh, there you go. There's a pathway, Ken, an abdominal one.
not a very pleasant one.
Yes. But I think, you know, I was thinking because for me, because when I first started working with her, probably about 12 years ago, I think I had mentioned she was my first patroness when I officially started to study the path. And so I worked with her during my year and a day studies, and I still work with her. I went into that deep dive and I read a lot of stuff. And it was interesting because sometimes I was like, nope. And then other times I would read something and I go, oh yeah, okay. Because I am, you know, for me, there's a maid mother crone aspect to her. And a lot of people, or maiden mother crone, a lot of people recognize her very much the crone aspect. And I've worked with the three different aspects. I'm being very careful that I'm not saying too much because I don't want. Hecate is not someone that one would want to piss off. We'll just say that. So I'm being very cautious. And so that idea of being separated, as you were saying, she's left me behind or something like that. The first thing that popped into my head, it's like when you go off to college, you move away from home and your parents are not there. And then you get to come home for vacation, for holidays, and then you get to be caught up because that's when, and you know, I'm thinking about this as me, as looking back at my 30 plus years leaving home, I'm like going, wow, if I knew then what I know now, or look how I've grown. And, you know, it's almost like, you know, we were talking about I was talking earlier today. It's just like going, don't try to rush things. If you're baking a cake or you're baking bread, you put it in there. You don't open it up right after you put it in the oven because it's going to go flat. So I needed to share that. Thank you for listening. So, Ken, this has been wonderful. Any chance you might be willing to have me pick a card from this deck? I don't know if you've heard of this deck, the Oracle of the Hekatean Path, as a message for people. Might you be willing?
Who did that?
I don't know. And Bobby said that Hecate is the definition of F around and find out.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned probably in a video somewhere along the line a friend of mine, they used to refer to invoking Hecate not in a sort of way of actually, a curse or anything, but just asking her to step in on a situation and view it. And if she felt that there was a necessity for her to act upon that situation, he then referred to it as dropping the H bomb, because literally, she like what Bobby said there, it is, F around and find out. She doesn't
Yes.
take any prisoners.
Yeah. And Brett too was like oh geez, don't F around with her or you'll find out. And it's so true. And I mean, because she don't have time for this stuff.
But again, I don't know necessarily a deity or spirit that does,
True.
And I think this is the thing, this is where you get this misconception that, oh, well, she's a dark and dangerous goddess, you shouldn't work with her. And it's like, well, no, if you're going to look at it like that, then no god or goddess is safe to work with. Even when people say, oh, Aphrodite, she's all this and that, and it's like, yeah, she was also, as far as Caesar was concerned, a war goddess, and she had a black dark aspect, and that she's not all pink and fluffy and champagne and bubbles and all that kind of stuff.
I have, and I'm allowed to share this. My experience with Hecate is, if I do something that's not the best for me, and I'm asking for help, she will come up and smack me upside the head, tell me what has happened, and then she will hug me, dry off my tears, kiss my forehead, and tell me to keep moving on. Because she's not going to hold a grudge. I mean, let me phrase that. I have been fortunate she has not held a grudge with me, because I listened, but she is that stern maternal instinct that wants me to be my ultimate best.
Yeah.
So who better to go into the dark with than the dark goddess? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Deities, like people, respond to annoying things differently. Some people and deities just roll their eyes. Others really let you know they're annoying. You're annoying. Yes.
I think Hecate does both. I think she can sometimes roll her eyes, and then other times she will really let you know.
Well, and here's the thing. What's interesting, look at me, I'm pointing. What's interesting for me is she will let me know in a way that is going to hit me really, really hard. And because it's going to be so meaningful for me, other people may not notice it, but boy, it hits me right hard in that spot. So, all right. I've shuffled these cards. I'm going to ask you to pick a pile: left, middle, or right.
Middle.
Top, bottom, or middle.
Top.
Oh, look, Artemis.
Yeah.
What would you like to say about Artemis?
Well, I mean, as the card suggests, the card of independence. Throughout all of Artemis's myths, that is what she strived for. Even from the point of her birth, she was the first one out, and she immediately turned around and helped her mother deliver her twin brother Apollo. So she's never, ever relied on anybody else other than herself. And I think, despite the fact that it's easy to, especially, in these patriarchal times, where, still women are being denigrated and pushed aside and seen as something less. Artemis is there as the enforcer and the empowerer. And again, the massive conflation between Hecate and Artemis in antiquity, because they shared so many spheres of influence, I suppose, and because they were both important goddesses in their own right, that they could be seen to be synonymous with each other. And they protected mothers and children and childbirth You know, but they were also wild and free, you know, virginal, as in, you know, not necessarily as in not having sexual partners, but not being owned by a man in you know, marriage.
Yes.
You know, and they are very much a case of, again, I think, you know, harkening back to what Bobby said, you know, F around and find out, you know.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we could all do with a bit of that, you know, telling, you know, outward projection of F around and find out.
Yeah. And yeah, it's, yes, Brett, too. It's effective for me, that communication. And the boomer mill is here enjoying the conversation whilst we're lurking. And yeah, it is a great description. So I also think you know, one thing is that I think about too is this: we have the bow, Artemis's bow, and what comes through for me is the goddess will be as accurate, is going to be accurate. Pay attention, because you may think she missed her target. She didn't miss her target. She never misses her target. She hit exactly where it was for a reason.
Yeah. And if, you know, even if you look at the myths, when, especially regarding Artemis and Apollo and their bows, you know, Artemis is a huntress. She always hits her mark. But at the same time, you know, that, you know, Apollo is a solar deity and Artemis is a lunar one. But like Apollo was a god of healing, but could also fire plague arrows and things like he did in at Troy, and, you know, with the Iliad and things. They're not just straightforward concepts. You know, these gods and goddesses that, you know, Artemis can hit her target to kill. She can hit her target to succeed. You know, there's lots of different ways of interpreting it. And again, you know, we were going on about how you can what's the word, disrespect or insult gods and goddesses. You know, again, look at Artemis's myths. You know, Actaeon, you know, that he looked at her while her and her nymphs were bathing. She turned him into a stag and his hounds ripped him apart. You know, again, there's cautionary tales in myth, but again, there's also spiritual truths hidden in them if you start to look, because again, you know, this concept of being rendered and rent and devoured, but in, you know, in a spiritual context, you know, very shamanistic, very rebirthy, you know, there's so much scope to look into these things. But yeah, Artemis definitely, you know, she just does what she wants, you know, and I think that's the key. I think to a degree that's the key of enjoying a life, you know, free and unfettered, is to be independent. And I'm not necessarily saying go and, you know, rob a bank or don't wear any pants to work or whatever. You know, there are certain things.
I mean, you know, social norms and expectations, you need to understand them.
Yeah, so, of course. You know, and she's, you know, she did you know, bend some rules and break some concepts that were expected, you know, of the women in that particular time period. But yeah, I definitely think she is a source for empowerment and, you know, and that sense of independence.
Well, yes. Hi, Peace Mama. Well, and I want to read something from the description that you wrote on that. This is your time. Do what makes you happy and brings you a sense of freedom, for it is blessed by the gods. Cast off expectations and conformity, and with laughter fly free like an arrow shot from her bow. I mean, yeah. So, Kenn, what is coming up next for you?
So trying to get this book done.
Well, yes,
and I appreciate away at trying to do that. But there isn't actually anything actually planned at the moment. I don't have any sort of things lined up as such. I'm just kind of trying to break the ennui and get the book done, and then hopefully, you know, start to put the groundwork together for the next project that I will hopefully get to work with Chris Butler with. Again, you know, to complement the already highly successful from all told of this deck. Yeah, so
yeah, you happened to mention something about that previously about there, or Chris did, or you did, but you know, a possibility of another type of deck. So stay tuned, everybody. So, you know, how's that for taunting people? So Jose is here. Hi, Jose. Good to see you. Good to see you. Ken, I appreciate you spending time with me.
I appreciate you for inviting me on. It's really nice.
Yeah. And I think somebody had talked about, and I can't remember who it was. Oh, I should probably talk to you afterwards, so that, you know, I don't piss anybody off. But I feel like Bobby had said something. No, anyhow, I could actually see. No, it's not an Artemis deck.
Change one word. Change one word.
Yes. So, but actually, you know, sometime if you'd be willing, I'd love to be able to have you join me and do some readings just for people. So, and you know, maybe we could get Bobby to join us if Bobby would do. You know, I just threw Bobby under the bus. Just invited Bobby to do something with us. He, you know, Bobby, you know, has no clue or anything. That may not want to do that. So anyhow, I will stop talking because it'd probably be better. So, all right. Thank you, Ken. And all of your links are below. If you have made it this far in watching the playback, please leave a comment to let us know what you think. And subscribe to Ken's channel. All of his information is below. So we will say farewell. Bye.
Bye.